Hey guys, it's Paul, combat veteran, MMA fighter, YouTuber, and we are back checking out the next iteration of Luton's How to Make a Space Marine. Let's get into it. So this is Aspirants. So these are kids that have been selected from their worlds and are beginning their trials to be selected as a Space Marine.
With the easy part over, the selected candidates, now known as aspirants, will begin the ritual process of becoming a Space Marine. This may be a formal process of reciting scripture, or it could involve further trials. These could take place on the homeworld or result in immediate departure for the aspirant. Each chapter has their own private and guarded initiations. Some of these can be heavily traumatic and are usually significantly harder tests designed to break those who show even the smallest cracks of weakness. These trials for the young aspirants may even include ritual slaughter, scarification, even amputation and bloodletting. It's all designed to prove their commitment, loyalty and unwavering faith in the Astartes chapter.
See, okay, I'm a little confused by this because they just, in the previous section, they said that sometimes people are just sort of forced into it, right? They don't choose to enter the Astartes selection process. You're thinking like the underworld gangs who are forced to fight. So like imagine you're an underworld gang, you're forced to fight, you win, and then they're like, you have to prove your commitment to the organization. It's like, what commitment, dude? All you did was kidnap me. And I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of kids that would probably react that way.
Surprisingly, some...
Especially feral worlds, right? You're picking somebody up from a feral world, and you're like, prove your loyalty to the Blood Angels. And they're like, who is a Blood Angel? Why am I being kidnapped by a giant metal man?
Aspirants do not pass this phase of testing, physically or mentally. Aspirants will continue periods of testing and examination as well as actual live combat during their period as a recruit for the Space Marine chapter. And some of these trials may be cleverly disguised as coming-of-age rituals, other celebrations some more combat-based. All, though, will be observed carefully by senior members of the chapter and chaplains who will be assessing key traits and behaviours, looking for candidates who fulfil their exacting requirements. Some of these aspirants from feral worlds or even other worlds may not be truly aware of what Space Marines are, and this innocence may in some way protect them from making overthought errors that cost them later. Still, some chapters actually take little interest in these early stages and will only actually become involved later once aspirants have been further thinned down.
Okay, yeah, gotta ask the lore guys, is there like a retinue of non-Space Marine personnel that run these sort of things? I mean, I'm thinking about not just the actual recruitment and running of these trials, but also things like maintaining equipment. I know they have apothecaries, they have librarians, but those are special duties for specific Space Marines. I'm thinking more like somebody has to like count how much ammo they have left, store the dreadnought, right? All that stuff should be a function. It seems like it's a waste of time to allocate one of your only 1,000 Marines to do that. So there should be like a retinue or some sort of support staff at work.
The whole process is a physical and psychological minefield. Some challenges could be unachievable, while others the simple act of survival is enough to merit approval to progress to the next stage. All the tests put to Space Marine aspirants are designed to test every element of their being to the limit and expose any weaknesses that are present, as well as learn about how they handle and make judgments on situations they are presented with. While the recruitment age for these aspirants is undoubtedly young, it's worth remembering that the nightmare environment of the 41st millennium is undoubtedly very harsh, and so growing up and becoming an adult quickly is something which many learn to do, and so their age shouldn't necessarily dictate your judgment of them based on our current period in time.
Okay, I mean, that could be a fair point. Maybe this is just a world where a universe where just everything is horrible, and you're just trying to find the most horrible kids. Maybe you want maybe you want Space Marines to be messed up. I don't know.
Standard Astartes trials for these young recruits can include knowledge of self. Astartes look at recruits' mental strength equally to the physical. The horrors they will face in their lives as a Space Marine, despite later conditioning, require the strongest character in a recruit to be successful and worthy. They may use a chapter librarian to impose psychic horrors on a recruit to see if they survive the nightmares they're forced to witness. He may be forced to take drugs and face the worst parts of his own psyche. The stress and trauma of this trial can often physically affect their bodies as well, so in many ways this becomes the ultimate test for
This is actually true. We used to think that the psyche was the psyche and the body was the body, and that the two operated sort of independently. But in fact, we now know that there's a huge interplay between the mental state of someone and the way their body operates. We know that people who are, for example, have PTSD, right, that they are, you can see elevated levels of all sorts of hormones in their blood. They're more likely to develop, as we talked about in the last video, develop certain types of cancer, certain types of cardiovascular disease. We also are now starting to understand the gut microbiome, the way that the bacteria that live in your gut can impact your mental state. So yeah, it's absolutely feasible that these sort of even a period of incredibly intense self-examination, again, ratcheted up to 11 as Warhammer 40k always is, will affect pretty dramatically the psyche of this human being.
Recruits. Completion of this trial will undoubtedly fundamentally alter the young recruit forever. Some chapters, like the Imperial Fists, consider this kind of mental testing especially important, but do so by exposing their recruits to literal physical pain, and we use devices like the subtly titled pain glove. These hook into the nervous
Okay, just wait, let's see what a pain glove is.
System of the recruit and inflict horrific pain, but also maintain their consciousness well past what a normal individual could handle. The result will either be a mentally toughened but probably scarred individual, or a complete mental breakdown and death.
Okay, magic pain gloves, that sounds like a reference to Dune, which actually in Dune there was literally the exact same thing. Though unlike a glove, I think it was a box that you put your hand in, and it produced an unbelievable amount of pain. But the prospective, what was it, the Kusach Heteroct or something? The prospective, it was supposed to be selecting for some sort of human being with perfect mental control of their faculties, and supposedly it produced this intense pain, but they were like, if you pull your hand out of the box you'll be poisoned to death. And so Paul Atreides was the only person able to just keep his hand in the box despite the overwhelming impossible pain. And yeah, so of course stole that straight out of Dune, stuck it into the Imperial Fists Space Marine chapter. Cool. Solid.
An obvious and standard test for many recruits is exposure. Most worlds of the Imperium have unforgiving environments, and so sending out recruits into these wastes with little to survive with is an easy way to tell who is strong enough as a candidate. Space Marine apothecaries can rebuild damaged individuals, so the test is less of can you survive without consequences, and more simply, can you survive? Many worlds are severely irradiated, frozen wastes, toxic wastelands, or ashen wastes, where planets have suffered total ecological collapse. Alternately, a planet could also be a literal jungle full of horrific creatures, small and large, ready to tear you to pieces or just melt your face off. As stated, the test is simple: survive for a set period of time. It will also likely involve some object of crossing a distance from A to B, so as to avoid recruits just digging a hole somewhere and sitting in it until time has elapsed. Some of the tests could well be impossible to complete and are simply assessing who can survive longest or travel furthest before dying or near death.
Okay, so I gotta point out this is ridiculous. This is a terrible method. First off, if you've ever done any sort of backpacking, outdoor stuff, camping, and certainly any survival training, you know that at the end of the day, a lot of this is luck. Yeah, skill plays a tremendous part, and without skill, you will definitely be screwed. But a lot of it's just dumb luck. Again, I'm imagining if you're a Hive World kid, you have no chance in one of these exposure training ones, right? Whereas if you're a Feral World kid, it could be business as usual. But even then, if you're a Feral World kid in, on a desert planet and you get dropped into Ice World, you're just not going to have the skill set to survive, right? No amount of improvisation, no amount of resilience and toughness is going to overcome your basic biological needs for shelter, homeostasis, right? Maintaining your body temperature, for example. And so and again, commenters, you got to let me know, lore experts, do Space Marine chapters align their recruitment with their trials, i.e., will Hive World undergang folks fight in duels? Will Feral World kids do exposure training? This is to me one of the most important questions, because again, you have to ask yourself when you do this sort of high intensity training. Ultimately, you've got to ask, what am I selecting for, right? You could be just selecting for someone who's lucky. And maybe in the Warhammer 40k universe, right, being like charmed by the universe and being able to be a desert nomad who gets dropped into Ice World and just sort of survives just through their own luck and guts and resilience and tenacity and the blessings of the universe, right? The universe will just gives them the opening they need to survive every time. Maybe that's a skill in of itself, right? Maybe those people are just, they just say, hey, this person is blessed by the universe to be in Astartes. But again, that doesn't seem to be how Warhammer works. So like I always take issue with the fact that like these trials are often heavily influenced by just random luck. Again, you look at like Special Forces selection, it's very similar, but they don't include a lot of these, like, there's a lot of physical tests, but the dynamic high-risk stuff doesn't really feature as much, right? It's not like you're having the recruits, right? There's no hand-to-hand combat in Special Forces selection, and the reason that is because you don't want them to hurt each other, because you could accidentally, in round one of a tournament, place your two best fighters against each other, and then what should be your two best fighters, one of them goes out in the first round looking like a dweeb and maybe even gets hurt, So that's why they don't do these sort of ritual type trials.
Ultramarines and
in modern times.
Space Wolf chapters are known to favour exposure testing. A fairly self-explanatory trial, recruits are pitted against one another in one-on-one combat. When the last few remain, the assessing Astartes will usually halt the assessment. The type of duel could vary between armed or unarmed combat, consecutive combat, or recruits switching out on completing rounds. There is one constant though, and that is it's always a fight to the death. Again,
Okay, this is, again, the problem with the tournament format. If you're like, we're going to find the top 5 killer instinct recruits, right? Well, the problem is you got to run a duel in a tournament format. Your eventual champion is going to beat 15 people on the bracket. And it's possible that in round 1, he fights the person who's actually the second best qualified, right? Or the second best fighter, and kills that person in the first round, right? So now you're not getting the best Space Marine, you're getting one highly qualified fighter, and if you're talking about top 5, maybe the other ones are top 15, but there's no guarantee, right? You see what I mean? You see how this kind of works out, like luck of the bracket? You also are selecting for a bunch of other weird stuff. Like, what if one of your recruits just happened to be part of an underworld gang where one person knew a bunch of hand-to-hand combat tricks, right? You happen to have this extra little bit of knowledge that your opponents don't, and you beat the shit out of them, right? This is just like, it's like an MMA fight, where, if you happen to be a D1 wrestler, it doesn't matter how gritty or tough or resilient or even how hard you have trained versus your opponent. If you have this like unique skill set in your back pocket, it's pretty much decisive. And so again, and if you're selecting for the best MMA fighter, right? If you want the best lightweight fighter in the world, then yeah, you're fine, perfect. Bring in people with the high levels of skill sets. But if you're using it as a means to an end, right? If you're saying we're going to find the most gritty and resilient person in the world, but we're going to do so using MMA fights, right? That's not really that effective a method.
Apothecaries are able to heal most ordinary human wounds with ease, so these fights are often fairly no-holds-barred brutal affairs. Amputation and heavy trauma being the norm. Unsurprisingly, duels are the Blood Angels trial of choice, but others such as Dark Angels, Imperial Fists and Space Wolves also put this trial to their recruits. War is life in the Imperium.
Okay. Yeah, this... Again, here's the other problem with all of these trials, really, is that you're not perfect, right? Yeah, let's say an apothecary can heal any person as long as there's a heartbeat. What happens if you die, right? Or what happens, if it's totally conceivable that you could receive mortal wounds where, especially I'm thinking like a knife fight, right? There's a saying in martial arts that is, says the loser of a knife fight dies on the street, the winner of the knife fight dies in the hospital. And it's because they're high stakes and they're brutal, right? So it would be totally conceivable that two highly aggressive, relatively expert fighters are going to kill each other in the ring and you will be left with no champions. Same thing with the exposure thing. Right? It's possible that your two biggest, most hardcore people are going to drop dead. Again, you have to ask yourself, what am I selecting for? If it is the skill intrinsic, right? If you're saying, I want to know who the best Astartes is at killing Tyranids, right? Then drop them in a Tyranid swarm, and whoever kills the most wins, right? We've established that. The test is the thing you're selecting for. But if you can't select for it, right? You're trying to select for who will be a brave and valiant battle brother for the next 10,000 years of their lives as they defend the Imperium of Man as an Astartes, that's really subjective. So you've got to be like, all right, what things actually identify those traits we think are most important? Again, maybe luck is one. Maybe luck is a real concrete thing in the Warhammer 40k universe, and you just throw BS at your recruits and see if they die, and see if they're lucky enough to survive. But to me, and to simple logic, that's just not a way to go about it. Okay, we're gonna pause it there. This is like crazy, guys. Thank you for sticking with me. Make sure you check out my Patreon. Right, thank you to my Patreon supporter right now. We got one, Kovash is his name. Also, check it out. I got merch. Gotta love merch. Love the coffee cup. Give some love. Check out the shirts. We got the shirts back there. Check out my second channel, my Instagram, and be sure to subscribe to this video and hit like if you enjoy it. You got to tell the YouTube algorithm that I'm putting out quality stuff. Okay, thank you for sticking through to the end. You guys are the true fans, and I will see you guys next time.